It's a small world after all. Welcome to American Esoterica. If history class gives you the near, this is the far. The essential stuff in between. The personalities, events, and other ephemera that shape our history and culture. I'm Brian Powers. If there's any common thread that runs throughout American history, it's a profound sense of connection. We see the same cast of characters making decisions and taking actions that ripple down through time, and those effects can still be felt today, tying us inextricably to our consequential figures. We can even see connections that tie our disparate eras of history together in surprising ways, but only because it shows what a smooth progression time is, rather than the various boxes in which we mentally like to stack our different segments of history. Our subjects today reflect that continuum, and these aren't as much stories of incredible coincidence, so much as they're just essential context for the historical moment. Take, for instance, the raid on Harper's Ferry in what is now West Virginia. Abolitionist John Brown rented a farm just south of there under an assumed name on July 3, 1859. Let's talk about that day for a moment. It was the same day 4 years later that Confederate General Robert E. Lee lost the Battle of Gettysburg. The next day, July 4th, would see Lee retreat on Independence Day, the day that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams both died in 1826. But back to 1859. Brown spent the next few months training a group of around 21 men to attack and take the federal arsenal in Harper's Ferry. He had spent the better part of the years leading up to this moment attacking pro-slavery groups, sometimes brutally murdering them. His ultimate idea was to try to launch a massive slave rebellion with federal weapons from Harper's Ferry, which would continue to grow in size and momentum as more and more enslaved were freed. On October 16th, he hoped to push over the first domino. He and his forces managed to seize the armory, the arsenal, and 2 bridges at Harper's Ferry, taking a bevy of hostages along the way, which he kept in the armory firehouse. Later on the next day, as word of the raid spread, the United States sent 90 Marines via train to put an end to Brown's raid. In this miniature civil war, those freeing the slaves lost, while the United States won. It was a little ironic because the forces of the United States sent to capture John Brown were led by one of their most celebrated officers, Colonel Robert E. Lee, and his aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Jeb Stuart, both of whom enjoyed the experience of fighting abolitionists so much that they made a career out of it. After a trial lasting 5 days, the jury took 45 minutes to reach a decision that John Brown was guilty of all the charges levied against him: murder, conspiring with enslaved people to rebel, and treason against the state of Virginia. He and the 6 of his men who were captured along with him were sentenced to hang. On December 2, 1859, the sentence was carried out. John Brown was hanged in Charlestown, Virginia. To keep any attempt at a rescue at bay, the governor of Virginia banned most civilians from attending the hanging, but instead brought in 1,500 members of Virginia militias and students from the Virginia Military Institute to secure the surroundings. Jeb Stuart was among them, as was Professor Thomas Jackson, who would earn the nickname Stonewall in the years to come. A nearby actor wanted to witness the execution so badly that he signed up as a member of a city militia, the Richmond Greys. And that's how John Wilkes Booth would be present at John Brown's execution. A couple of years and a few states away, John Brown lived on. Stationed with the 2nd Battalion of Infantry at Fort Warren in the mouth of Boston Harbor, this John Brown was known for being the good-natured butt of a joke for sharing a name with the now-dead infamous abolitionist. To pass time clearing construction debris at the fort, the soldiers would often sing. One evening, a soldier cracked a joke about John Brown, their John Brown, being dead, and another chimed in singing with, "But his soul goes marching on," to the tune of a Methodist hymn named "Say Brother, Can You Meet Us?" From there, they spun a silly song about their John Brown, who often wore a knapsack that was too big for him. In time, the song became a mainstay in the repertoire of the 2nd Battalion, which broke up but merged into the 12th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry, better known as Webster's Regiment because it was led by Colonel Fletcher Webster, the son of the exceedingly famous lawyer and statesman Daniel Webster. Webster's regiment was called up to the front in July of 1861. But as they made their way south, they gave musical performances along the way. The song that had become John Brown's Body earned them near universal acclaim, and its chorus of Glory, Glory, Hallelujah earned the group the yet another nickname of the Hallelujah Regiment. The night before they left, they performed in Boston one last time. In the crowd to see them off was poet Julia Ward Howe. The song stuck in her mind, and she heard it again in November of that year in Washington, D.C. She was so inspired by the chorus of John Brown's Body that she wrote her own poem set to the same tune, what we know as the Battle Hymn of the Republic. It was published in Atlantic Monthly in February 1862 and exploded in popularity in the North, especially among the troops of the Union Army. In 1863, a group of Union soldiers who had been recently captured in Gettysburg in the weeks leading up to the major battle found themselves imprisoned in the infamous Libby Prison near Richmond. One night, just a few weeks after their capture, they were told by their Confederate captors that the South had just won an incredible victory at Gettysburg, humiliating the Union. As they sat dejected and demoralized, the enslaved man tasked with feeding them whispered the truth. The South had tried and failed to advance further into the North, suffering a massive defeat. The soldiers were instantly on their feet, cheering and crying, and in the center of the room, in that dank prison, Captain Charles Cardwell McCabe began singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. By the end, the walls of the prison echoed with the voices of all the men kept there. McCabe was later released in October of 1863 in a prisoner exchange. And one evening at a meeting of the United States Christian Commission in the U.S. Capitol, he gave an account of his time in Libby Prison before employing his smooth baritone in a rendition of the battle hymn so stirring, none other than Abraham Lincoln stood up and with tears streaming down his cheeks yelled out, "Sing it again!" after Lincoln would be felled by the assassin present at the execution of the man who partially inspired the song that would become Lincoln's favorite patriotic song. The presidential funeral train made a multi-stop tour throughout the United States on its way to a final stop in Springfield, Illinois. On April 24, 1865, that funeral procession made its way through New York City, where it passed the house at 849 Broadway. In the incredible actual photograph of the event, there are two little boys, 6-year-old Theodore and his younger brother Elliot, watching the procession from an open second-floor window. 36 years later, Theodore would take the oath of office at the age of 42 to become President of the United States. Roosevelt would only survive to age 60, passing in the year 1919. Maudie White Hopkins was just 4 years and 30 days old when Teddy died, but 15 years later as a 19-year-old woman, she would marry a man named William M. Cantrell. Cantrell was an 86-year-old Civil War veteran by the skin of his teeth. He joined the Confederate Army through French's battalion in Pikeville, Kentucky, and was immediately captured, days later, and sent to the prisoner of war camp of Camp Chase, Ohio. Maudie agreed to marry the elderly Cantrell and care for him in exchange for being left his house and land when he died. In the midst of the Great Depression, it wasn't such a bad deal, and it was how she survived. And survive she did, all the way up to the year 2008, when, as the last surviving Confederate widow, she passed away 3 months before the election of President Barack Obama. Hopkins wasn't the last Civil War widow, though. She was upstaged by Helen Viola Jackson, who received a similar offer from her Union Army veteran husband in 1936, although she never received the pension after he passed after his daughters threatened to ruin her reputation. Jackson, the last known Civil War widow, survived to see the election of President Joseph Robinette Biden, dying on December 16, 2020, at the age of 101. These connections all serve to remind us that our past isn't as far behind as we think it is. American history is relatively recent compared with the millennium-plus spanning histories of other countries on other continents. In a very real sense, we're still the new world, and our history continues to affect us. So let's stop for a moment and contemplate what that means. For example, beloved comedian Bob Newhart passed away in 2024 at the age of 93. Influential journalist Barbara Walters left us in 2022 at the age of 93. We don't view these folks, no longer with us as they may be, as historical figures just yet. Aside from discussing their accomplishments in decades past, for a large portion of the American population, these individuals loom large in our collective recent memory, and their passing still feels close. Yet, both are born in the year 1929, the same year as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Do we see him with the same perspective, or is he a figure relegated to the past? What about Anne Frank, also born in 1929? Our history may feel like it's at a remove, but every once in a while, knowing that you've walked the earth alongside the grandson of the 10th president, Civil War widows, and cherished celebrities of the same birth year as iconic figures we only now get to read about in the very past tense, it might be good to remember that history isn't the past written down in our books. History is nipping at our heels. This has been American Esoterica. All sounds are made by me, Brian Powers. Did I get it wrong? Did I get it right? Just want to talk about how Betty White was born 7 years before Anne Frank? Drop me a note. The address is yell@americanesoterica.com. More information on the show can be found at americanesoterica.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless America.